A little while ago, I lost my Super Mario 64 virginity, and honestly, I kinda wish I kept it. While everyone else seems to love this game, I couldn't help but feel disappointed by it. For me, it didn't even come close to living up to the hype. I voiced my problems with the game loud and clear. Some people agreed with me, while others said I was wrong. They excused the game's shortcomings by saying that Super Mario 64 was one of the first games of its kind, released in the early days of the N64. And while that doesn't change the reality of the game that I played, it is fair enough. I admit it, maybe I was the teensiest, tiniest little bit too harsh on the game. I still stand by everything I said, and I would say it again today. I still think the game is overrated, but at the very least, it does have a decent enough excuse for being the way it is, and it is a video game milestone. There, I said it. Are you happy now? Super Mario 64 was not a one and done deal. Mario still had more adventures in the mysterious third dimension to come, the next of which was Super Mario Sunshine. Much like 64, I have only ever heard good things about this game, which means I have a bad feeling that history is going to repeat itself. I'm going to go into this game with high expectations, only to be crushed by the reality of the game, which was oversold by Nintendo's army of dick riders. The only difference this time is that if Super Mario Sunshine is bad, it has no excuses. You can go ahead and ignore 64's problems all you like, because it was revolutionary for the time, and no one had ever done anything like it before. But you can't apply that to Sunshine. Super Mario Sunshine is 6 years and 1 console generation later, so those justifications mean bugger all now. They've had plenty of time to figure out 3D platforming and iron out all the kinks. I expect this game to blow Super Mario 64 out of the water. And if it doesn't, I'm gonna kick off. In other words, this better be fucking good. I should clarify that I've really been looking forward to playing this game since I blew genuine dollary dues on it. Unfortunately, that does mean I'll have to tango with my sworn arch-nemesis, the GameCube controller, but I am excited, and I've got my fingers crossed for a jolly good time. The game begins with Mario, Princess Peach, and an elderly toad called Toadsworth on their way for a holiday in Isle Delfino. As they're watching the obligatory tourism video, Princess Peach notices a shadowy figure that looks like Mario in the background. She tries to mention this to her companions, but to no avail. Mario is too busy cumming in his pants over some seafood, and Toadsworth is just blatantly ignoring her. He's thinking about what he's going to do when they land. Why would he listen to Princess Peach? He's an old man, set in his old-fashioned bigoted ways. He would never listen to her, because women never say anything worth listening to. Please, don't take that out of context. Shortly after Mario is finished spunking in his overalls, the gang lands on Isle Delfino on an airstrip that has been covered in this psychedelic gooey paint stuff. No one knows what it is, but it's enough to cause a hoo-ha. Peach spots the culprit, the same shadowy Mario-like figure from earlier, and tries to draw attention to it, but no one else is paying attention because these pig-headed men believe that women are second-class citizens. Mario is sent to fetch for help, but when he reaches the residence of Isle Delfino, they arrest him, believing him to be the culprit. He is put on trial, and despite Peach's objections, which were ignored in yet another demonstration of the plight of women, Mario is imprisoned and sentenced to community service. He must travel across Isle Delfino using his flood machine to clean up the mess made by his mysterious shadowy counterpart. Already, this story is pretty weird, especially for a Mario game, but at least it's not Peach getting kidnapped yet again. The next thing I did was turn the game off. I'm sorry, but I can't keep playing like this. I can't keep putting up with this GameCube controller. I already have issues with the fundamental design of the bloody thing, but my controller has an issue with its thumbstick that I can already see is going to make this game unplayable. I would describe the issue, but it's probably easier just to show you. Please take a look at Mario running forward in a straight line at full speed. No joke, that is me fully pushing the thumbstick up. I could not put any more force behind it if I tried. Assuming that this would cause catastrophic problems for me later on and lead me to unfairly hate this game, I turned it off then and there. So much for playing authentically. Oh, but what's this? Oh my goodness, it's a dolphin who's come to help me out. And look at that, it's Super Mario Sunshine on this dolphin. Wow, what a strange and funny coincidence. Life is just full of surprises, isn't it? Ah, it feels good to not have a GameCube controller in my hands. Anyway, where were we? Ah yes, Mario was arrested. After being released from prison, Mario and his flood machine are tasked with their community service, their goal being to rid old Delfino of its mess and restore it to its former glory. Our first job? To hose down a giant puddle of actual shit. Just the sort of thing I look for in a Mario game. Cleaning said shit erects a statue upon which this mysterious Shadow Mario is standing. He jumps down, kidnaps Peach, but after some running and faffing about, he is ultimately defeated by Mario's flood machine. What was that I said about Peach not getting kidnapped for once? Shadow Mario flees into the statue he was standing on earlier, and it is by following that we end up in the first level, Bianco Hills. This is a big moment. The levels in this game are what I'm most curious to see. Our first task in Bianco Hills is to clean up more shit. Someone on old Delfino must have some pretty awful diarrhea if there's this much of it, and if some of it is alive. Imagine taking a monster dump and a living head just sprouts out of it and starts screaming at you. What a nightmare. I was a bit worried that this sort of thing would be the main aim of the game, going around levels and spraying down questionably coloured goop with the flood machine. But my fears were relieved when I picked up the shine and noticed the big piranha plant in the background with another shine above its head. I thought, oh good, that'll be something different for me to... Oh, you are fucking joking! One of the things that annoyed me the most about Super Mario 64 is that anytime something happened in the game, you would be kicked out of the level and forced to re-enter. Whether that was picking up a star, or dying, or whatever it may be, you were kicked out and forced to re-enter. In my review, I called this out, because it's bullshit. It's annoying and tedious to deal with, and there is no good reason for such a thing to be in the game at all. Some people responded to me saying that by explaining that they do it so they can load up assets and objects that are required for different stars. And while that doesn't excuse kicking you out for every death, it's fair enough for each star. But do you know what a good game would do? If they needed to have certain assets and objects loaded up for a particular collectible, they would create a spot in the level specifically for that. A separate room, an offshoot area around a corner somewhere. Whatever, it doesn't matter. The point is it can just be somewhere else in the level. That collectible doesn't need to hijack the level and take over the whole area. Perhaps at the time of Super Mario 64, they hadn't figured that out yet. But this is Super Mario Sunshine, quite some time later on. Other games like this, your Spyros and your Banjo-Kazooies, had already figured this out. Why hasn't Mario? In fact, I'd say it's even worse in Sunshine than 64, because every time you return to Delfino Plaza, regardless of if it's because of a death or you've collected a shine, you're shown a short cutscene of something that's going on in the area. A new level you can access, Shadow Mario appearing somewhere, something to that effect, and it's so fucking annoying. Surely you only need to show these cutscenes once. If you exclude deaths, you will see these cutscenes dozens of times, and it's like, I get it! I know about the fucking pillar of light in the middle of Delfino Plaza. I see it! I've seen it 30 times at this point! Stop fucking showing it to me! And if you're really going to insist on reloading everything when there's a death or a shine is collected, you could at the very least, spawn me back at the start of the level instead of kicking me out. There is no need for the extra step of going to Delfino Plaza, watching the Pillar of Light cutscene, and then going back into the level. You don't need to do that. Just please take me back to the start of the level. I'd be alright with that. It wouldn't drive me up the wall. I don't understand why this game, like 64 before it, has gone out of its way to address this reloading problem in the most annoying and tedious way possible. It really is disheartening to see such an objectively terrible and outdated mechanic from Super Mario 64 return in this game, and it did end up souring my mood a bit, especially when I could see the next shine in the background already. But thankfully, Sunshine does make a lot of improvements over its predecessor that I'm eternally grateful for. Sunshine's levels are actually really well designed. I found 64's levels to mostly be pretty awful. They are often just a random assortment of shapes inside a giant cube, with no rhyme or reason for things being structured the way they were. In fact, there was barely any structure at all. Each level felt like it was designed by scrunching up a sheet of paper and unfolding it. And I am thanking my lucky stars that Sunshine went out of its way not to do that. Sunshine's levels have a logical structure, they have landmarks, everything is arranged in a way that makes sense, they feel very natural and comfortable to move through, it's just an all-around improvement. I don't think there's a single bad level in this game. Certainly there are some lacking ones, Gelato Beach and Serena Beach come to mind as being pretty flat and uninteresting areas, but the rest are actually pretty fun to explore and mess around in. And thankfully, most of the levels weren't covered in feces. I think the gameplay has been improved as well. Playing as Mario is pretty fun. He's not as slippery as he was in 64, and I found him easier to control and maneuver. His flood machine also gave him some cool new abilities like being able to spray water to interact with the environment, and also being able to hover, which was a very useful movement tool. Even without the flood machine, Mario's movement was pretty solid, and that was made obvious in the various platforming sections sprinkled across the game. They were great at demonstrating the extent of Mario's basic movement, and they were a lot of fun to play through. Some of them were pretty tough as well. And would you look at that? They're in their own separate rooms, as opposed to being plonked in the middle of a level. What an idea! If only they had done that with all the other shines. Fucking idiots. Speaking of the other shines, I did enjoy the various missions in each level. There were a lot of repeated ones like chasing down Shadow Mario and the red coins, but there were a lot of unique ones. Some cool boss fights, some races, some sick platforming challenges, some funky vehicles, some elaborate puzzles that I may or may not have spent half an hour trying to figure out. There's a lot of variety. They weren't all great, this pinball minigame in Delfino Plaza sucked ass for example, but I mostly enjoyed them, and across the board, I certainly enjoyed them a lot more than most of the stars in 64. That said, I did not go for 100%, with all the bullshit of being kicked out for every death, kicked out for every shine, kicked out and actually losing a life for losing a race, how does that even make sense? And also the blue coins, of which there are many that are needed to buy more shines. It just seemed like a bit much, way above my pay grade. I think if I had stuck it through and gone for every shine, I would have ended up in hospital somehow. I'm not willing to go through that amount of pain for little reward. Fuck that. But even so, I think this game's gameplay is really solid. Its platforming is a lot of fun, and even when it goes full force on the gimmicky front, it still works. No part of this game's actual gameplay was bad. Except for the swimming. Hated that, it was so awkward to control, and the threat of drowning didn't make it any easier. But besides that, no part of this game's actual gameplay was bad. As you'd expect from a game that's 6 years older and on the next generation of consoles, Super Mario Sunshine is a lot better than Super Mario 64 when it comes to presentation. A lot of the areas look brilliant. They have great atmospheres, and they're designed like locations that could actually exist, unlike 64's levels that look like someone shoved a Porygon into a meat grinder. The music was also fantastic. A lot of the songs were ones I recognized but just didn't know were from this game. That element of familiarity made it feel like I had been to these levels before, and I found myself humming along to them as I played, which, to me, is the sign of a good soundtrack. The only thing I'd criticize when it comes to this game's presentation is the lack of variety. I get that the entirety of the game is set on Isle Delfino, which is a holiday resort amusement park sort of thing, that naturally lends itself to levels based on beaches and bays and harbours and stuff like that. But that's basically all there is. Most of the level environments are extremely similar. I get that this game's whole gimmick is the flood machine, so Mario needs easy access to water, but that shouldn't be a limiting factor. You've got the small pond in that jungle level, why can't we also have a level in a desert oasis? Or an underground cavern with some water in it, or a Victorian torture chamber with a water fountain. They could have been a lot more creative with the environments, and I think the game would have benefited from some more variety. It might have even led to some more unique objectives. The beaches, bays, and harbours were fine, but I did quickly become bored of those themes. I guess voice acting would also count as presentation, huh? Voice acting is not something I thought I'd have to talk about with a Mario game, and honestly, none of the voice acting in this game is bad in any way. I just wanted to point out how strange and unsettling it is to hear Bowser talk in full sentences. I kinda hate it. He's usually very foreboding and intimidating, with his brutish look and his mighty roar, but when he speaks in this game, all of that immediately evaporates and he just comes across as a fun dad? That is in part due to the story. Remember when I said Peach didn't get kidnapped until Shadow Mario shows up and kidnaps her, but regular Mario saves her? Well, sometime after that, Shadow Mario shows up and kidnaps her again, only it's later revealed that Shadow Mario is actually Bowser Jr., who kidnaps Peach because he believes she is his mum. Not even kidding, Mama Peach is a phrase that Bowser Jr. actually says. The final boss and the climax of this game is Mario intruding on Bowser, Bowser Jr. and Peach having a family bath. And after the Bowsers are defeated, Bowser admits to Jr. that Peach isn't his mum, with Jr. admitting that he knew that all along, and honestly, what the fuck? It's such a weird, out there story, especially for Mario, whose only story in the history of its whole existence is Peach being kidnapped. Why did they need to bring mummy issues into the mix? Also, why can Bowser Jr. transform into Shadow Mario, and why does he cover Al Delfino in that gooey paint shit? How is that even related to kidnapping Peach at all? Was there something I missed? Was I too busy cleaning up Shadow Mario's bodily fluids that I didn't notice what was going on? The one time the Mario series doesn't just stick to the damsel in distress thing, and it's this. What the hell, Nintendo? Overall, I definitely had fun with Super Mario Sunshine, especially when compared to how much fun I didn't have with Super Mario 64. It made a lot of improvements in the right areas. The gameplay overall was more fun thanks to the better designed levels and shine challenges. Mario himself was more fun to control thanks to his less slippery movement and the capabilities of the Flood Machine. The game obviously looks and sounds a lot better, even if there is a lack of variety in level themes, and it made a bit more of an effort with the story than most Mario games, even if the idea of a family bath makes me want to vom. The highlights for me were definitely the platforming challenges that take place in the Void. They were a raw test of skill and I really enjoyed them. I had a pretty good time with this game, but would I play it again? Probably not. Even though my experience with Super Mario Sunshine was largely positive, and I enjoyed it a lot more than Super Mario 64, there's still a lot of room for improvement. Much like 64, Sunshine is built in a way that is fundamentally annoying, and it carries on some of 64's worst traits. The big one is obviously being kicked out of a level at every opportunity. At this point I can excuse it for 64, but not this game. They've had plenty of time to figure all this out. There's no reason for it anymore. Even shit games like Spyro Enter the Dragonfly get it. There are precious few other games who use this system, so Sunshine has no excuse for being irritating like this. Honestly, if it weren't for the tediousness of that kick-out re-enter cycle, I probably would have attempted going for 100%. But the thought of dealing with all that leaving and watching a cutscene and re-entering and loading and leaving and watching a cutscene and re-entering and loading just made me want to commit homicide. Looking back, I also now appreciate the variety and level themes that 64 had. For Sunshine, a lot of the levels felt the same. There wasn't a lot of individuality to each level, and that sort of hurt the memorability of the experience. That said, I did like Super Mario Sunshine. It was definitely a step in the right direction for the world of 3D Mario, and if it keeps learning from its mistakes like it sort of did with some aspects of Mario 64, then the next 3D Mario game should be even more of a blast than this one. I am left the teensiest tiniest bit let down by some of its choices, but Super Mario Sunshine is a good game, and I'm so glad I spent $60 on it, only to end up emulating it anyway. Fuck's sake.